Hello and welcome back. And that's right, today we want to return to a NAS operating system we talked about in detail more than a year ago. Today I want to talk about ZimaOS, built on CasaOS and originally only available on the ZimaCube platform from Icewell, now universally available. And a number of you have been in touch to ask me to kind of deep dive this software. We've seen a lot of different NAS operating systems come out, the woodwork, CNN, FNOS, when then talking about HexOS, that kind of layer on top of TrueNAS, and of course the likes of UnRAID and more on Multimedia Vault. But ZimaOS arguably is one of the best out there in terms of the absolute free space. When it was bundled in with the ZimaCube, then it was arguably not as value a proposition, but now, as a universally available platform, I'll say right now, this is one of the best resource use versus capability options in the market right now. And let's go through it today. Now, I'm running this on a small N150 NAS system. This is the Zaba Hydra N150 4x M.2 NVMe NAS system. I'm using a Windows PC, as you can see here. I've already got the software installed. To give you some idea, by the way, how easy it is to install this, you can go and download the latest system image from their own website. You just go to the ZimaCube in the download section, and then from there you want to download the Blanch Etcher tool. This is completely free. Have yourself a USB ready to go inside your system. I'll just stick that in there. Make sure the USB is recognized by the system. As you can see there, it's already got another error, so we'll ignore it. So in there, what you need to do is once you've downloaded that IMG file, flash from file, find it. So in my case, I need to go into my download section, search for the word Zima, and find it there, click OK, and then click flash. It will go in and do command prompt, and now it's going to start flashing that USB. And that USB, all you got to do then is install that USB, hopefully it's here on screen, install the USB inside your system, boot up your system, then access it via KVM, and then from there you can install it just like you would TrueNAS, just like you would a number of different NAS operating systems. It would be nice if they had a USB creator, just like we've seen from the likes of UnRAID, but still, this puts it on par in terms of complexity of installation as anyone else in the market right now. But one thing that places it ahead of a number of options in the market right now, and remember, this is free, is it arrives with a client tool. Now, this client tool isn't just your standard scan the IP, find what's on the network scanner. There's actually a few extra bells and whistles that, although the development from CasaOS into ZimaOS was certainly a slow execution as they nailed the fundamentals. Hell, after 6 months, they were chuffed to bits. They got a basic level of RAID in there. I would argue once they nailed those fundamentals, they flourished. Now, as you can see on screen, I've already downloaded it. I've already installed the application. There it is on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and break my way into the application. I've already got the system on the LAN. And then from there, you've now got this client tool living on your desktop. Again, you can find out more about it for Mac, for Windows there. There's lots of information on their website about the installation. But looking on the bottom right of the screen, and not only is it found on the local area network, but alongside it identifying how it's been found, whether you want to establish a remote connection, more on that later on. You've also got the option to take advantage of Wi-Fi adapters on your system. So if the NAS you've got has got a little M2 Wi-Fi key, it is supported. Ignore that, that's from earlier. It's allowing you to Wi-Fi connect to the system, but it doesn't stop there because ZimaOS also supports Thunderbolt connectivity. Now, there's some big caveats here. If you go through their own guide, there's a lot of information about the caveats of connecting directly with Thunderbolt, but this is something that brands like QNAP have been charging thousands of dollars for as a feature, and they include it in their free OS. Now, the reason I'm adding a load of caveats is Thunderbolt direct connectivity on a ZimaCube system works. We did it in our review. We got 20 gigabits per second alongside the 10 gigabit that was inside it. Fantastic stuff. But if you're going to use third-party hardware, you're going to be repurposing maybe a UnRAID NAS system, maybe that new Minis 4, maybe the U-Star systems that have got a USB 4 connection. There's no guarantee that it's going to work currently. The drivers that are built in to the ZimaOS software are native to their own ZimaCube system. They're not necessarily going to be identical to the drivers required on the Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 connections on your custom hardware. Moreover, Your system may not have dedicated enough lanes to the USB 4 connection. So it may be a USB 4 connection on a Gen 4 times 1 lane, which is going to give you 20 gigabit. But also it might be on a 3 times 4. There's lots more. And that alongside the driver support will make a difference on whether you can direct connect. Nevertheless, I think this is something that's going to get ironed out over time as we're seeing more generic USB controllers being utilized on NAS systems. And nonetheless, this still all adds up to the fact that this is a free to go NAS operating system that you can install on your custom hardware that is potentially going to support Thunderbolt depending on your setup there. Alongside that, you've also got the option for backing up locally, selecting a folder on your local system, and then from there, from that local system, synchronize it live with a client, a live synchronized first-party client tool. There's barely any free, let alone open source based NAS operating systems in the market that arrive with a client tool right now in order to do that synchronization, and all of that managed on that client tool locally. You can run multiple backups, synchronize multiple files. So if you're running a multiple team setup, this is really appealing, again, for that free app. Don't worry, there's some negatives coming down the road. But alongside the backup operation, you've got PeerDrop. This allows you, if you've got multiple devices that are using this client tool, so you've got a few different devices in your local area network with this tool, if they install this app, you can PeerDrop files back and forth from the NAS in a convenient, secure, point-to-point, end-to-end fashion there. Again, these are things like what Synology charges quite a lot for in a free appliance there. Finally, when we go back to the application, we've got standard open the files, easy drive mapping. So to put that into perspective, I'm entering in my Windows credentials, ask it to remember the credentials, and boom, I've now got access to any shared folders on the system. If I go into the folders and files menu there, and I can enable one of these to be shared, it will appear inside that directory there in order for me to take care of it. These are things that for a free service, as I say, it's been a slow, steady, but recently highly featured escalation of the software, are great to see in a client tool on a free platform. And remember, the sharing of those files on things like SMB multi-channel or just sharing via a direct link are native. Here I am in the web browser there, and if I want to share via Samba, I can say the location, whether I want to use this as a time machine backup, you Mac users out there, say who's got access with the credentials, click create, and bang, it's now good to go and ready to share, which means that becomes an available share in this repository. And there it is, there's that backup folder. So it's really nice how straightforward and easy it is when there are so many DIY options in the market which are just too damn intimidating. And indeed, accessing this user interface here in the web browser, it's really not that difficult. Once you use the client tool, you just go in, you select go to dashboard, and it opens up. Simple as that, you can see there on screen. And this dashboard, I would say, toes a line between something like UnRAID and TrueNAS. It certainly isn't ready, and there's a lot of features still to go, and it's heavily dependent on containerization from third parties. But I will say the baseline GUI and user experience is very fluid and very responsive. To put it into perspective, system information is readily available there, and again, you can use third-party applications like Netdata, Jellyfin, Plex. These allow you to kind of do the basic stuff for your multimedia, for system management, and of course a native file explorer built in there. So you don't need to install a third party for that. You can at least browse your files and folders here in the main user interface. Remember earlier when I showed off the NAS that I'm using here? This one here, I'm not using any NVMEs in here. I made a conscious effort to not install any NVMEs in this system. The reason being, as you can see here with the storage, I don't have any other drives inside. This is running from a 64 gigabyte eMMC module. A number of very modest NAS systems right now, like this 9-watt N150 system, are rocking out with a small storage module inside. ZimaOS can run from that storage module. You should still have a backup of your system configuration somewhere and regular backups in place anyway, which you can manage, by the way, by going into these settings menus and creating a lot of that connectivity. But at the same time, this is so light that you're not going to need to waste like a 1 terabyte SSD in order to install the operating system. You can use this on a really small amount of storage and save the main storage area for your big RAID configurations. All that said, I will say configuration options are a little basic even now. For example, we go into the general options. I've got the latest software right now, 1.4.1, and you know, we can set the time zone, we can change the search engine, what year is this, we can turn that search off if we want. From there, we can choose hibernation modes there, but it isn't scheduled on off. There's no manual air gapping control here. And again, you can have this news feed or disable that. And if you go into the developer mode, you've got a little bit more configuration options there, tapping into something like SSH if you want to crack on with your CL, your command line there, DLNA modification and handling. And again, turning on Samba on and off. It's all fairly standard stuff. There is a semantic search integration there. Again, it's going to be heavily dependent on your hardware configuration of choice. Remember, this is being designed for ZimaQ primarily, but obviously it can be used on other hardware systems, as they do detail on their own apps, on their own guides, by the way, of which they've got quite a lot, by the way. From there, let's go back into the ZimaOS. We'll look at the storage configuration, and we'll come back to that later on because we're going to have to reboot the system with some SSDs to show you. But you can see the baseline of our default 64 gigabyte storage that this system arrives with, that I've gone ahead and installed the operating system on there. Network management, fairly standard stuff. Again, we can adjust the MTU, change some of the IP from dynamic to static, standard stuff that you would expect these days. And obviously it's going to configure very directly into your own modified setup there. Interestingly, remote access is included with this using zero tier. It allows you, and if you do, by the way, install the client application, and we go into my network connections, zero tier also gets enabled in with that. Ultimately, it means remote access has the zero tier base for your remote relay service to communicate with the system, but obviously performance will hit from that. If that doesn't sound of interest to you, and remember that's been included with this, by the way, and that really helps with that PeerDrop stuff, you can go ahead and go into the application center and install things like Tailscale, install other remote access protocol services if you choose to. And the application center, although again it's containerized, so we can't give them a tremendous amount of kudos for that, because they are just jumping on original existing registries there. It is still very easy to enable and set up those remote accesses using third parties, or for the more convenient, you can still take advantage of the default ones included. Now, returning to that file manager, I will say again, this isn't some Billy Basic / download FTP word crap. This is a fully functioning browser-based file explorer native to the application. So along the top there are the default folders that are created during the installation of ZimaOS. Some of this, by the way, carries over to Casa, but Casa is designed for much more efficient systems. This, on the other hand, is designed for much more prosumer hardware, and they're scaling up over time. So, for example, these folders here, we can drag and drop stuff in if we choose. So if I go ahead, and there's an adapter that I'm working on at the moment, let's dump some of that in there. We can drag and drop. It goes straight in as you would expect. From there, with these files, we can find out real-time information about. There's a little bit of metadata that could stand to be perhaps a little bit more information. From there, we can also duplicate, copy, cut, paste, etc., as well as sharing with a link. And if we are using those remote access protocols via their own zero-tier based relay, we can use that. Or if you're already using the third-party ones, those are your protocol and they are built in there for you to use. Again, we can copy it around. We can download it locally to our system. It's all fairly much of a muchness there. Again, if we try and play it in the web browser, we can play this video file. This is to do with temperatures on some SFP devices that I'm working on there, and it did allow me to play it natively in the window. Alongside that, you've got the dedicated multimedia folders there. You've got your download folders. Again, the apps you use, you're going to have to bind those to those different folders as and when you need them. But interestingly, alongside the storage that we're going to go into later on, you've also got the option to add cloud services. And SMB services. So let's say you want to add a Google Drive. You just add that. It asks you to add your protocol and your information. You add it in, and it will synchronize with your cloud space and make it appear on the file manager natively. It doesn't allow you to use a lot of the semantic search and stuff like that. You're not bolting it on with the appearance of local. It is just synchronizing with the cloud space, allowing you to integrate it with the backup services if you choose to. Alongside that, you can go for LAN services. So this will allow you to connect to another NAS on the local area network. Unfortunately, it doesn't have an automated search. So for example, I believe there is a device on this IP here, but of course I'm wrong. So I would have to go in, use a tool such as Advanced IP Scanner, and then find the IP and enter it in. I kind of wish that was built in natively, or at the very least built in natively into the client application to search the local area network to add backup folders from SMB related systems. Hopefully that's something they add later on. But if it seems really intimidating, just up there, select the import option, and this allows you to, again, connect to the cloud directly, connect the LAN directly. If you don't want to go through these side options and you want it all in one place to bolt them all in, you can do that and just synchronize them all together. It's been quite neatly built into the file manager rather than its own dedicated backup appliance. I know there's going to be a mixed give and take on that, who likes that and who doesn't, but still, very, very good for a free application. And you know what? I'm going to throw this in. Slight correction to something I said earlier on. Put my hands up in the air and say I was wrong. I was shutting down the device to put into mem.2 NVMEs to test the RAID configuration system. And I noticed down here when I went to shut the device down that for shutdown options here, I've got the option to set the scheduled on and off. That's something I was looking for. Now that is a bad way to show that information, Zimmer, if you're listening, Icewhale. But nevertheless, at least it has a scheduled on and off for those who want to create air gaps, so when they're asleep or at work, the system can't be accessed, but can only be accessed on your time schedule. So lovely feature, terrible location and implementation. Right, so we've rebooted the system there, and now I can show you a little bit more about the storage there. So I've already installed 4 disks. You can see it's found all 4 disks. There we are, we view our disks. And as you can see, I've got a 512, a 1TB, 1TB, and a 1TB. So let's put 2 together, shall we? As straightforward as that, let's create ourselves a RAID. We can go for a RAID 1, for example, here, and get that put on there. We'll select 2 of our disks. It's really that straightforward. We can go ahead, click next, bang, save storage, give it a name. Understand it's going to initiate a RAID. It's that straightforward. There's no dicking around with sorting out certain blocks of storage, certain, not jails, but sort of sorting out your VDEVs or anything like that. Once you create this area of storage, creating a volume is pretty much instantaneous. And then from there, you can start playing with your storage. Now, it's not going to have the complexity or the feature set of something like a ZFS base pool with kind of the inline benefits, some of those that are built into something like a TrueNAS setup there. But as you can see, we can go into files and we've got our area of storage. There's our safe storage. We can create ourselves a folder if we want to. We've got ourselves a folder. We can go in and we can start dumping images. There we go. Let's chuck another image in there or a video. And boom, it's that straightforward. There's no dicking around with the multi-layers of the thing. It's really, really appealing in that regard. And what I really like is this tiny little diagram that sort of represents the amount of space being used. Now, don't take those seriously. They're accurate blocks. It reminds me of memory cards back in the PS1 days. But still, it's little tiny things like that that I really like about what Zimmer are doing. Now, what about a larger RAID configuration? Now, as you can see, the disk didn't have any data on them, but perhaps they did. Maybe I've moved them from another system and they've got partitions. That's something that's a real bane to things like TrueNAS. When you're importing drives over, or at least doing a fresh install, that sometimes hidden partitions need to be erased on the command line rather than using the GUI. From here, you can format them pretty much completely and it will wipe them. Again, it doesn't say anything about secure erase, it doesn't say bit by bit, it could just be a quick format for all we know, but at least it's easy to action from within the interface there in nice big chewable buttons, and you don't have to dig them out with like 4 swipes going into triple dots on the right hand side. Not much, but it's still clearer here. Creating that RAID, if we go for the RAID 5 configuration, for example, from there we can attach the drives that we want to use. So again, if I go for a smaller drive, so this is that 512 drive here of those 3, we click next. So one of these drives is theoretically not a 1TB drive. We go over that, go over the operation, and I don't know if you noticed it there when it was building it, it only showed 1TB. So you're not able to mix and match drives. You're not able to do, say, a Synology SHR or an NAS or a T-RAID from TerraMaster. You can't mix and match your drives. That's something that's not available right now. Hopefully that's something they will change. And although I wasn't able to action it in this video, Zima on their own videos they posted on Facebook do show that RAID expandability is supported here. I think it is going to be very dependent on the RAID config you choose to use, but it is nice to have it on there. Now, what about other features and services? You know, like a RAID 6, you know, like ZFS. Well, technically they are all supported down to the command line. If you use the right command line, you can go in and create these things. But of course, when you are doing that, it kind of slightly undermines the usability of ZFS's of ZimaOS's user-friendly interface. So although I am going to give them credence that you can establish ZFS pools or import existing ZFS pools into ZimaOS, as well as RAID 6 creation and other RAID configurations as well, by the way, I'm not going to give them full credence and credit for that, because that's sort of outside of what this platform is trying to be. But that's really it. It is a simple, lightweight platform designed to be user-friendly but low resource management. Something I would repeat over and over again is not available elsewhere. OpenMedia Vault still has a dependence on plugins and command line. TrueNAS is still very, very intimidating. UnRAID is easier but requires license payments and still a level of complex understanding and knowledge. HexOS is a paid platform built on TrueNAS there. I could go on. Ultimately, right now, ZimaOS is slowly evolving to be the real tortoise and the hare situation where it is rising through the ranks. Hence this video and why so many of you have reached out to me to dig into this ever since I first started looking at Casa and Zima when we were looking at things like the Zima board. The Zima board 2 finished its crowdfunding. That is a small N150 powered single board server that supports this platform. And as long as Zima and Icewhale precisely continue to develop this software, it's going to be really interesting to see what other proprietary options are going to arrive. Is it finished? I don't think so. Is it perfect? No. But is it one of the best free options in the market right now for the beginner? I think it might be. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, we will come back to ZimaOS in maybe 6 months' time because I'm really interested in where they're going with this. And the fact that they're not locking this software behind hardware, as we've seen from some other vendors, in order to create turnkey NAS solutions to kind of make the product package more desirable. I really like what they're doing here with so many horses in the race, supporting DIY and supporting non-custom pre-built solutions. This can only be a good thing for everyone. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think in the comments. There'll be a link to a few different products that I've talked about today linked below. So if you found the video helpful and if you want to purchase from those sites, please use those links. It really helps me in NAS and NAS Compares because we get a small commission on anything that is used, purchased via those links used below. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time.